All right. So in our Discord post, we were pretty evasive about what we wanted the meeting to talk about, and so we'll just come out straight with it. Basically, next week at some point, we will be upgrading the current Clone Wars machine. That also includes Half-Life, but we'll just call it the Werewolf machine, the Gmod machine. We'll just call it the Gmod machine. We'll be upgrading the Gmod machine, and this means that in game everything will be better. So I'm going to go into a bit of detail about how we've got to this place and also what's been happening. So those of you might not know, but in the past 10, 12 days, actually past 2 weeks, right, Seth? The current provider we're with, which is called Tempest Hosting, has had a lot of problems internally. They've had a lot of problems, and we're not happy with their service, essentially. Um, I've already gone ahead and moved about 90% of the Rust servers away from this provider, and I have been organizing to move Gmod as well. Um, you may have noticed that in the past 2 weeks, the server has been very unstable. It was even offline for a day or two. I think for one day last week, it was actually entirely offline. And this is all because this provider is having internal issues with their stuff. I don't want to go into loads of detail about that, it's not really relevant. But safe to say, we had literally no warning. They just started basically failing us as a service. So we need to basically replace them. Um, and because of that, it leaves us with a pretty decent opportunity. It means that we can actually now look at upgrading our hardware. We bought the current machine we're using about 5 years ago, back in 2020, even late 2019, when we moved to this provider. And we've not really touched it since. To be fair, Gmod is quite an old game, so it isn't the sort of scenario where we can really afford to buy, absolute top end CPUs because we really only run Clone Wars here and Half-Life. And we are working on other Gmod servers, but there's not a lot basically of income coming from those servers. There's certainly enough to sustain development and to sustain the community. There's no problem with that, but to go ahead and buy very expensive servers is another thing. Just to give some context to what I mean, the Rust servers that we run on some of those machines, they cost upwards of $600 a month to maintain, and this will be difficult for Gmod to do. However, in 5 years, a lot has changed in CPUs, and there has now been a lot more affordable and fast CPUs compared to what we have. So the specs will be upgrading too, and I will say them and then I will explain what this actually means for those that are not tech savvy, so to speak. We will be upgrading to a AMD 9800 X3D along with 64 gigabyte of 6000 megahertz RAM. Now, this will be really, really good for our server. This is probably some of the best hardware we can really get to run our Gmod server with. That's actually going to be reasonable to pay for. But this is top end. This 9800 came out only a few months ago, essentially, for the market. So it's going to be fantastic for our server. Now, in game, what it means for events is that the events will be very, very silky smooth. They'll be very, very good. And I can near enough promise you that. I'm very confident it will be because I've already taken this machine on Rust and I already know what it's capable of. Gmod will be very, very easy for it. So I think in the event you guys just had, because I was there, I was watching, you noticed that the server slows down a lot. Now, don't confuse this with your client FPS. That's going to remain unchanged because that's just your computer. But the server side, so like your ping, the server tick rate, the way it feels, the response to shooting, hit reg, all that sort of stuff, it will be drastically improved. It will be night and day difference for the server. And this is really what we need as well if we're going to continue to keep the play count that we have. In the past 30 days, Clone Wars has exploded with popularity. I think basically since Christmas, right, Seth? There's been so many
Yeah,
more
yeah.
players on Clone Wars, and I'm not going to go into the reasons why. I mean, it really there's just a lot of players floating around right now for Clone Wars, but we have to accommodate those players, and I would say right now, Sufa's done an amazing job with the skills that he has and what he's working with, because only he can optimize code to make it run as smooth as it is. Without C's contributions for the past 3 months to optimizing the server, it would be almost unplayable in current event sizes. But Suf can't code a new CPU, so we have to now take this step to upgrade, and then we will be able to always have events which are in the 100 to 128 area without really lagging. When is this going to happen? This will happen at some point next week. So we're going to get hands on the machine this weekend, and then we'll need to set it up, and we'll need to do some, transition. We plan to take the server down to do the transition later at night, so that we don't interrupt any play. We're not going to have like a 1 day downtime or anything like that. We plan to just switch it over, and then there we go, we're done. This does mean the IP changes, but in Gmod, they have something called the server token key, and it basically means that we can move our favorites over, so you guys won't need to refine the server. Regardless, we'll post the connections to the new server in case you do struggle to find it again, but we don't think there's going to be any problems on that front. It's a very unique server. People, they have ranks here, so they're going to find the server. But I mean, that's basically it. This is very important, though, as well for the future of our Gmod servers. Me and Seth, we do plan to make more Gmod servers. We have Moscow in the works. And Moscow especially is a server that's going to need this kind of CPU, because we do want to have, vehicles and things like this, which are usually quite heavy on a server. I mean, it is in Clone Wars when we do ships. And on Moscow, the vehicles will pretty much always be there, so this will come really in handy in making sure we can have a nice sized map with a good amount of vehicles, etc. But I'm sure the event planners will put the machine to good use. I am told already that the events they run are already really stressing the machine that we have right now, so this is probably going to be good for them. Yeah. I mean, we have to actually, I haven't actually tested this CPU in Gmod yet. I've only tested it in Rust, and Rust is way more powerful than Gmod. So my assumption is that for Gmod it'll be very good. The only Achilles heel with Gmod is that once you go above 100 players, the source engine itself, like just the way the source engine is built, starts to choke. But this shouldn't be nearly as bad as we see at the moment with 100 plus. Honestly, it will probably be pretty good. I think most Gmod servers, when they have 100 plus players, as long as the CPU can handle it, they only really start to have serious problems when they're using plugins which are not optimized. Plugins which are doing stupid things, which we don't have at all. I mean, we've optimized everything as pretty much as we can right now. So yeah, that's the announcement I wanted to make. Now, we will do questions. Now, before we do the questions, this is a community meeting, so the questions can be about anything. It doesn't have to be just about this upgrade. So if people want to ask about like SCP or anything along those lines, I'm pretty happy to talk about that. In fact, actually, if there are people here from like SCP, etc., who've moved over to Clone Wars, if they have questions about that, I'm happy to answer it. I would actually like to say before anything else, I will say it now because in case no one answers the question, the SCP Discord was removed, and some people have DM'd me some pretty nasty stuff about why that is, but I wanted to just go over that, why we did that, or should I say, well, we're forced to do that. So when we closed down the Discord, originally we wanted to keep the Discord kind of in like a zombie state for like a month, so that people could collect anything they need, if we can put it that way. No, don't in this one stuff. Sorry. If we locked the Discord and SCP, we made it so people couldn't type. Now, that wasn't because we didn't want people's feedback. I know that closing SCP was going to piss off a lot of people. Like, I knew that was going to be the case before we did it, of course. But in the context of the time, that was a decision that we made. Now, we couldn't leave the Discord unlocked because who's going to moderate it? I mean, the Discord is going to be filled with hundreds of messages probably of just not very nice stuff, and probably some of that stuff will end up getting some people flagged by Discord because people post all sorts of bizarre things. I'm not even going to say on voice what ends up getting posted in these situations, but we didn't want to moderate that, and we didn't want that to impact other people on the Discord too. We just wanted people to be able to see what they needed, collect what they needed, and then answer questions basically privately, which is what we did, rather than having a free-for-all in the general chat. In the end, though, we did have to close it down because a lot of staff members from the SCP staff team were, they weren't too thrilled about what was going on, and we weren't sure whether any were going to play with the Discord in the way we didn't want. And some of the SCP staff members left to make their own thing, which is fine. Now, that leads me to another point, because I've heard some things about this too. We quit SCP, which means that people can do what they like with what we've done. Obviously, we didn't release any of our worked on source code. I mean, that is stuff that I had paid for, and I don't have to release that. But the map, which was worked on, I gave permission to Crossfire to do with it what he likes. He's not restricted. If he wants to use it for another community, he can. I don't have any problems with that. This was basically a clean cut from that. And there's also a few things that, I mean, I understand when people say this, but I would like to address it. Some people they use this term, they call it pump and dump. I'm sure you guys have heard that before. The money raised for SCP, which was raised many years ago, we haven't done a fundraiser for SCP for years, was given pretty much all to Crossfire. We paid for half the map for Crossfire. We paid them all the money that was raised up front, so that so that it was fair. I mean, the fundraiser was for that, and you can ask Crossfire if he received money for the map, and he will verify like that he did. So there was absolutely no profit that was withdrawn onto other projects. The only other area money was given to was for development. That was it, and for maintaining the test server. That's it. No money was like given to me personally or to anybody else outside the project, and there wasn't really. I mean, respectfully, there wasn't a lot of money that was raised anyway. It was enough. It was enough to cover half of the SCP map. So that was not it. We just couldn't continue the project. Now, I don't want to go on circles about SCP because most of you guys here don't have a clue what I'm talking about, but I really wanted to address that because it does, I mean, if anybody says it, like anybody, it doesn't matter who it is, it can be me or somebody else, or it doesn't matter what role they wear in the community. Whenever you hear like nasty things or negative things, it upsets the people involved. It did upset me to see so many people angry about SCP, but I expected it and I understand why, but I would rather have done that than end up releasing something which I'm not happy with, and ultimately other people won't be either, and not waste everybody's time, but pretty much like not get to where we wanted to go. So, but yeah. What do you mean by so all the money was spent just to stop jamming, just so it was picking up 3 years later? Yeah, I mean, we were picking up the development 3 years later because for 3 years very little was done on SCP, and for us to really get the server where we wanted, we would have needed to have a whole rehaul of everything, including who was running it. We only had one SMT member that was actually active outside of me and Seth, and that was it. Then nobody else was really doing anything. and we tried. I mean, we tried for 6 months to recruit people from the community, and we just couldn't. And once we started to make significant changes, the way that we thought would be appropriate for SCP, to basically be able to compete with competitors, the reaction from the community was mixed at best. If anything, quite toxic in some ways, in a relatively unreasonable way. I mean, I'm not somebody that just like blames the community like that's silly. That's not an answer. But in this case, that there really was a big roadblock with the people that we had to pick from. Should I say that was left? I mean, in short, if I wanted to do SCP, I should have done it 3 years ago, and there isn't really any other excuse than that. Now, why didn't I do it 3 years ago? Well, that's a whole other bag of beans that I'm not sure I want to get into. But there was a lot going on back then with a lot of projects, and SCP just wasn't the priority at that point. So we put it on the back burner, and it was just there too long. Um, there's very little reason for me to continue a project if all of the people involved don't see it succeeding with the resources that we had at hand. That is dangerous and reckless to maintain. And sometimes when you're doing, when you're trying to make decisions like this, you can't please everybody, but you still have to make a decision at the end of the day. A rock and hard place type situation, and that's basically the outcome for that. Yes, no. I mean, I would have loved to have spoken to the SCP staff team first, but respectfully, everything was getting leaked. There were people in that team who were holding the rank for 3 years who were not proven anymore. Essentially, they were not proven in the field. For example, the Star Wars staff members that you see on the channel now, pretty much all of them have been put through their paces at some point, and the majority of them won't leak stuff. I mean, there's only certain things, of course, you're going to want to say to a group of 30 people, because the more people, the more chance of a leak. But in SCP, everything we said was leaked, and then sometimes actually things were not just leaked; they were leaked incorrectly, like they were misinformation, misunderstood. And we knew that as soon as we discussed anything like that with the greater team, it would, within probably 15 minutes, be in the general chat. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I wouldn't like to be right in that situation. So we didn't. Instead, what we did was the mm, the people involved with the project who were, developing the project, who were doing the day-to-day tasks on getting us to the point where we needed to be, they were involved in that decision making. It wasn't a decision where it was just me on my own, just decided suddenly, like, okay, we're going to stop this. Um, I don't want to go into the nitty gritty of how it came up to begin with, but it was very much a group decision. We just sort of, all of us realized that, this isn't going where we want to go. I can't see us being able to do it. Um, yeah. No, it's not. Leaking information is not the end of the world, no. But if you're going to leak information that we're thinking of closing the project when we actually don't want to close the project, that may as well be the end of the world for the project. That's going to cause a serious amount of problems. And in the context of SCP, which is already pretty rocky at the point we were at, that would have been very bad and would have been, a lot of extra cleaning up for no reason. Well, we don't know who was leaking what. I mean, that was only one of the reasons why we didn't talk to the team. But, what we're going to say to the team, I mean, other than informing them that project-wise we're not going forward, you know. I mean, I know what the opinion of the SCP staff team is, which is going to be keep doing the project. But ultimately, we couldn't get to the point we needed because the contributions that we were having, or lack thereof, from the community was just not enough. Like, we was never going to be able to compete with competitors in that field, not with the stuff that we had. Just impossible. As I said, I need to do this 3 years ago. In fact, I mean, I will say this because Biggs won't mind me saying this, but the day before I announced that we were closing it, I had a conversation with Biggs. If you guys know Biggs, he's the ex manager. He was the only person originally working on the project before Seth got involved, and Jason, right, Seth?
Yeah,
His name wasn't Jason, yeah. Before Jason and Seth were involved, Biggs was maintaining it, pretty much one manning it. I mean, the S&T was nowhere to be found. God bless them. I mean, they're nice people, but they had a lot of stuff to get on with real life. But Biggs was maintaining it solo, and for me to get SCP to even consider getting it where I needed to get, I would have needed him on board this time. And so I talked to him, and I told him, I said, if I can't get you on board with this project, we can't do this project. And I pretty much offered him, 50-50 for the project. So any profits that would come from the project after development, 50% would go directly to him. So we'll be partners on the project. I was very serious about trying to save this project, but he couldn't do that, and so we're basically out of options at that point. And we've looked through every single member in that Discord for people to try and fill the boots. But when a server's been offline for 3 years, it's going to be difficult. The thing about like Moscow, if we just use that as an example, they're grassrooted, which means that they made the idea themselves. The original founders of the idea, they're sitting in this channel. And many of the members that played the server that was relatively similar, amongst other things, are still around. It's not that long ago, so there's a very good chance that they can get their project off the ground and into the air. But with SCP that had been in basically a freezer for 3 years, that's difficult. The only thing that we had on our side is that people did want a server, but I think the server that they wanted was closer to V6, which would not have worked at all. It would have died. It would have been dead on arrival after all the people on the Discord played it. And I wasn't going to release that. I wasn't going to go ahead with that. So. User disconnected from your channel. User joined your channel. Anyway, I want to answer a few questions about Star Wars because I'm completely ignoring the questions here. I'm just talking about SCP, but it's okay, I understand, because no one's been able to ask anything about SCP. It's been pretty much blackout. I would have loved nothing more than to answer the questions for SCP on the day it happened, but let's be honest, if I went into a meeting on that day on Discord or Teamspeak, there would not have been a question time. It would have been just like crazy. Like, I mean, it would not have been good. So anyway, I'm gonna make the chat a little bit bigger for me. I can't see it with my eyes. There we go. Okay, so Clone Wars people, let me go through this chat. There is a lot of typing here. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat now. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat now, and I will start getting through them. Me and the boys here. User joined your channel. Do you see Unoriginal's question, Seth, about upcoming updates?
Yeah.
Can we say anything about that? Or?
Yeah, we can say a little bit. We won't go into the finer details of some of the stuff Sue's working on because a lot of it's to do with optimization and rebuilding. But there's a lot of big optimization updates coming, obviously alongside the machine upgrade as well. We should see quite a significant improvement. And we also have quite a few model updates in the works as well. Obviously, the long-awaited Jedi model update is still being worked on. And we have the event model overhaul, so we'll have a whole new set of event models, including just droids and stuff like that. But I can't really go into too much more detail at the moment because the update's still in the early stage.
Yeah, we did add some new stuff to the store. I think last week. We added this, so you can get custom crystals now. That's what I was asking about here, but I think they may be memeing. But we do have custom crystals now that you can buy. If you are interested, of course, you need to message Seth. And we also have the XP boosters for clones, which has been widely requested. Can we get an update? Can we get an update workshop add-on for to avoid errors or colliding resources?
What? The one linked, an important link, should be the most up-to-date one. Custom ships have been kind of put under the table temporarily until we can get additional modeling resources, really. There's just a lot, with custom generals and everything like that, so We are still hopefully planning on doing custom ships, but it probably won't be anytime soon,
Yeah.
sadly.
Trickster asks, regarding Star Wars as a whole, will there be maybe anything else besides the Clone Wars era? What might that be?
I think he's heavily insinuating Imperial. I mean,
uh,
we're not really planning on
I'm
doing another
joking, guys.
Imperial project, sadly. But maybe if there's a crazy influx in like player count on Gmod as a whole,
Yeah.
like an
So,
unnatural one.
I mean, we're a never say never kind of guys. So it's we did Imperial a number of times, and it hasn't worked for a lot of different reasons. But we're not going to go into all those. Other areas, maybe, I don't know. Right now, the view that the cat is taking for going forward, especially in light of SCP, is to finish what we're working on right now. Like we want to finish this Moscow thing and just work on that, um, and then look at what else we might do. To be fair, if we're going to do more Gmod servers after Moscow, it's probably going to be something fresh. I don't think like rehashing Imperial again is a good strategy in the long term, and it is difficult. I mean, a lot of communities don't have both servers, and there is the argument that right now, the potential for updates on Clone Wars could be a lot, you know, a lot better for players than trying to make a whole new game. Because when we go and make a whole new game, like a whole new Imperial, Clone Wars gets put on the back burner, which means everyone in this channel gets put on the back burner. So the community. So that's not always the best, and that actually kind of did burn us, didn't it, last time, Seth? We had to delay like a lot of Clone Wars updates
Yeah,
because we were working on Imperial, and that never really worked out well for us. But in the past 3 months, the updates that we've been knocking out for Clone Wars have been solid, and I think you guys would agree. We've had a really good time with the server, and I think we're not done with the server yet. I mean, there's a lot more we can do. Of course, we're doing this upgrade, that we've talked about, and that's going to make a big difference. Being able to reliably have larger events with high player count and it be playable, that that's going to be fantastic, and it will open up the ability for us to do other stuff with the server. Um, Moscow RP quarter 2, quarter 3. If you're talking about this year, mm, I don't think so. Not for a launch. But we will have like information as well as possibly even like betas in inside this year. But I don't want to say too much about that. I would rather Winter speak for us. But that isn't something that me and Winter are prepped for this meeting, so I don't want to say anything else about it and say something wrong. By the way, Winter, your mic is muted, Winter, just so you know, in case you want to try to say anything.
I wasn't, so all good.
Oh my god, that mic.
I had to grind and
That
talk hard.
mic.
Sorry, man.
Oh, have I got
I'll lower myself.
Yeah, we can all hear you.
Imagine.
I hate people working on models, but... Oh, sorry, do you want to say something?
No, all good, all good.
I hear people work on models, but what models? What's this new event model stuff they keep speaking about?
Razor's currently working on a new event model pack. We're mainly just replacing what's already there with much higher quality and lower file size models. But if you do have suggestions in regards to new event factions, I recommend you speak to Kicker or you put something in server suggestions. If you're an EP, just speak to Kicker though.
Sam asked about NPCs. Well, we're not looking to change the formula of events. If I talk from a technical perspective, like what could the server handle, the server could probably handle some NPCs with this update, yes. However, whether we should actually do that is another thing entirely. That's up to the EPs. I probably don't see why they would do it. I mean, if we have 100 players, 120 players, there's enough people for an event. You don't need NPCs. Maybe a few for passive stuff, sure. Really, it's going to help a lot with the bigger maps where you have like ships and tanks and Jedi's jumping around and all this sort of stuff. That's what we'll probably see the improvement. I can't see the EPs changing their formula just because of this update. In fact, actually, I would actually advise against it to the EPs. I haven't spoken to them formally, but I would say, like, when we do the update, just do your events as normal and let's see how it goes. And then we can slowly turn up the dial, because there is a limit to Gmod. I mean, Gmod has its own limits, and NPCs is definitely something which is heavy for Gmod. It is heavy NPCs. They always are, especially when you have 100 players. So, uh, yeah, yeah. So, big maps. So big maps don't usually cause like server-side lag. I mean, it's not entirely true, but the maps themselves are not causing the lag. What's causing the lag is the fact that the bigger maps encourage the EPs to go all out with their stuff. So that's usually like, bigger dupes, more ships. There's more people often as well on those type of events. And a lot of the time, for some reason, the big maps end up actually corridoring a lot of players in certain areas. They all collide together in some big rampage, and that causes a lot of lag. The FPS lag, like your client FPS, where your FPS goes down to like 20 or 30. This update will not change that. That's impossible. That's just your PC. You know, there's nothing I can really do about that. Sufa's made the most optimizations he can to the client side, but Gmod in general is quite, it's old, so it's not able to use all of your PC power to the full extent. Um, but uh, but yeah, as for server tick rate, we're gonna see how it goes on the update, and then if we have a lot of juice left, I mean, honestly, I'm not sure if we will during events, but if we do have a lot of juice left, we may look at increasing the server side tick rate, which would mean the server feels like, so there's basically more ticks per second, so it would feel smoother to play. But that would happen way later, because when you change the server side tick rate, you also need to change the weapon balancing, because all of a sudden the server is technically running faster, so weapons start shooting faster and stuff like this. So that's almost like an update in itself if we went down that route, and I'm not sure that we're looking at that right now, but it's something to keep in mind. I see Shepard is answering his questions, but in chat. Okay, yeah. So people are asking about Moscow, about like the kind of game we're going for. So, yeah, Moscow is not NRP. That's not what we're looking for in the game mode. There are elements of NRP that we want, but they're not related to like the Nazi part of the server. They're more related to the civilian RP than anything else. Like seeing why players liked doing the things they did in the server. Not LARPing in terms of the political side, but in terms of the gameplay, basically. Like the shooting play, the patrols, the base building, those sort of things. What kept players grounded in that world and what kept them coming back. That's what we're learning from. But we're not taking anything from NRP in that sense. None of the like plugins and stuff. We're not taking that over. We're making everything from scratch and in a different way. We do want the roleplay to be like, I guess, more roleplay and less like toxic in that sense. There's a lot going into it on that. I don't want to like say too much because I said I'm not prepared to talk about Moscow in depth, but just rest assured it's not going to be an NRP remake. If we wanted to do that, we would just make it suitable for the rules that Facepunch have laid out, but we don't have any desire to do that. I really don't want to make NRP again. It's just not something that I'm interested in doing. So, yeah. I mean, it can't be a reskin of NRP. I mean, the problem with NRP anyway is that although it had a very high player count, a lot of that player count was just based on, you could almost call it like clout, in the sense of like people were joining it because of the name, and they were definitely joining it because of the YouTube videos. And we can't rely on that for Moscow. So the server's going to need to be able to stand on its own two legs without trying to cause publicity. Of course, it will be grounded in history, the server, and we'll try to go for that realism aspect, but we want to get rid of the toxicness from it, to put it that way. Yeah, well, I'm not going to go into the in-depthness of the NRP player base. I mean, not everyone that played NRP was bad. There were plenty of players that just liked the Dark RP style aspect of it, being in a different universe, rather than just being your typical, your suit gives you 200 armor, Dark RP pay-to-win server. So, it was a bit different. There was definitely a bit more fairer gunplay and gameplay, and it was fun in its own way. But we want to take the fun from NRP and put that in Moscow, and then leave all of the negative stuff to the side that we can't even really describe in here. So Viper, you're best off just messaging stuff directly if you have an idea. But we can make nearly anything, to be fair. We'll be able to tell you. Oh, sorry. Sandbox. Yeah. I mean, we plan to be involved in Sandbox in some capacity. That's all I can say. But I will say this now, and I'll probably say it again in the future. Sandbox is not Gmod. And Gary said this himself, it is not Gmod. It is a very different game. When I first heard of Sandbox, I always thought it would be like Gmod 2, like it would replace Gmod. Like when it came out, everyone would migrate from Gmod to Sandbox. That's not going to happen. If anything, actually, it might actually have the opposite effect. A lot of people will probably go on Sandbox, be reminded of Gmod, and then go and play Gmod. I'm not even joking. If any of you here have played Sandbox, you might know what I mean by that. It's a very different game. It's way more aimed at people that play like Death Run and TTT. It's like for mini games. I'm sure there will be very complex games in there, and there already are. Like someone put Doom in there and stuff like that. Okay, very interesting, but it's not Gmod. It's not Gmod, and it's not going to replace Gmod. So yeah, I mean, it'll probably be its own little thing. For example, like we're not going to make a Clone Wars in Sandbox. There's also, at the moment, of course, it is subject to change, rules regarding copyright on the game. So, for example, you already know that Nintendo banned a bunch of stuff from Gmod. That's pretty rare for Gmod, but on Sandbox, they don't want at all like Star Wars stuff. That's something that they were talking about. They don't want any Star Wars stuff. So that pretty much cancels Star Wars immediately. Of course, that I don't know how they're going to enforce that. I don't know how it's going to work, but I think they'll be pretty serious about it because, they don't want any problems. Like Gmod is like, I don't know, it seems to have got away with a lot, but they don't seem to want this for Sandbox. Kind of. Now, it's we'll just have to see. I mean, like I said, like we'd like to be involved in Sandbox. We'd like to do something there, but the service that we make, it might end up being a much more of a Rust situation. And what I mean by that is like Rust is separate from Gmod, really. I mean, most of you guys here don't play the Rust servers. What happens in Rust doesn't really impact you guys, and I think that the same is going to happen with Sandbox. If we made Sandbox and we had a Sandbox Discord, it's not going to impact what happens here, and that's it. It's going to be its own little, economy, its own little environment, essentially.
User left your channel.
No, we've never had a first order server. They're not too popular. There was a bit of a spike in popularity with them, like around lockdown, like there was with every server, but they don't tend to be too popular, sadly. Yeah, it's quite a niche game mode. Clone Wars will forever be the king of Star Wars RP game modes, really.
Mm. Yeah.
I've got some exciting news, Hogus. Our Rust Discord server hit 150,000 members today. Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, guys. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think that's it for questions. I mean, you guys have no idea how much work I had to put in at the start of this month to move those Rust servers. It was rough. I know you guys don't understand fully, but it was rough. Yeah, I mean, moving Clone Wars, it's not going to be too difficult. It's just one server, but we had to move like 8 servers on Rust in a few days to avoid this downtime that was happening. Oh, it was quite stressful. Well, Taylor, you will just have to wait and see, won't you? That's all I can say on that. Uh, yeah. Well, it should be good. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I think it's time that we upgrade Clone Wars. Uh, yeah. Well, actually, that is something. We don't actually know how the server will behave for Gmod. So, and this is from my experience in Rust. Fast RAM, like 6,000 megahertz RAM, can have strange impacts on old games, even Rust, but let alone Gmod. I mean, Gmod engine is like, basically comes all the way back from 2004. So we will see how that works. Of course, if we start having like these like server crashes, we can just lower the speed of the RAM and it will work fine. It won't really make any difference in game. It's so old, but that is something we'll look out for. So I wouldn't be too surprised if we run into a few hiccups right at the start. Just being honest, it's all about discovering what's the most stable setup. Cause Gmod's old, and the game was never made for RAM that runs like 10 times faster than DDR3. So yeah, it's gonna be good. All right, I think we can bring the meeting to a close if there's not any more questions. We have events coming up for Clone Wars, so I need to let people get on what they need to do in their trials. But yeah, thanks for turning up. We will post on the Discord when this upgrade happens and anything you need to know. And I will post the meeting on YouTube a little bit. So thanks for attending. It's been a pleasure as always. I'm gonna like mute the mic. I need to get dinner actually.